Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Robin.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. The walls are closing in on me a little bit, but I'm
Where
doing
are you?
close to Amsterdam. We're close
Okay.
in the
Wow.
Netherlands.
Very
And you?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay. I wrote a line down from Country Girl. I don't know which one of us dreams bigger.
Yeah.
Were you always ambitious? I assume.
Extremely. Yeah. And I would say more creative and more creatively curious even than ambitious. When
Okay.
you're a kid, you don't know enough to be ambitious. You haven't been maybe enculturated in all like the competition and
Mm,
the scales of achievement of the world, but I've just always had a lot of energy and drive and creativity, even as a little girl. And that's what that line is about. It's talking about my dad. And in general, I come from a very driven, energetic family.
okay.
Everyone in my family has, really good discipline and high aspirations, which is a wonderful thing to grow up with. A great thing to give your kids. So that's what that line is about. But yeah, for sure, I'm a big dreamer ever since I was little. Yeah.
This is probably very difficult to pinpoint, but now with kind of some years behind you, do you know what this drive is, and for your parents as well, where this drive comes from?
That's such a good question. I know what the drive is for me. The drive is this desire to express a gift that you feel like you've been given, a creative, like all these ideas that have come to me ever since I was a little girl. And
Right.
I think the biggest challenge is as you grow up, because most kids have that, they have that zest for life and that joy and those ideas. And they have this kind of blissfully ignorant confidence in their ideas. And we're kind of trained out of that a lot of times as we grow up. By well-intended adults. But the challenge is to maintain that creativity and that enthusiasm and that joy as you get older, and then learn to craft it and cultivate it to be something special out in the world. So I think that's what it is. I think it's just this natural. I think it's actually more natural than it is exceptional. I think everybody has it. I just think the challenge is to see it as valuable and then really believe in yourself, as cheesy as it sounds.
But so in that respect, can I assume that your parents were very supportive of kind of the path you wanted to go down?
Yeah. I mean, my parents are very supportive of me and my dreams, and they instilled a lot of drive and confidence in me. But they haven't always been, just like every child and every parent. I mean, they don't always agree with every decision that you make and everything you do, but it's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. It's really about teaching your kids to believe in themselves and add value to the world, I think, more than anything. And my parents definitely did that.
Right. And when you were quite young, I think you started writing. And I think the first one was around age 10. So at that, it's very early. But at that point, what does songwriting do for you? Is it just kind of a very pure expression that early?
Yeah, for sure. Because I've always been an artistic person. And I actually used to draw and paint when I was little. And then when I learned to read, all I wanted to do was write. I loved words and I loved the imagination of storytelling. And so I started writing a lot. And then when I was 10 or 11, I started singing, and I realized I could put all those words to music. And that was the magic for me. I never wanted to do anything else after I discovered that.
Okay. And for you personally, as you started songwriting, what did you get out of it, so to say? Was it something where you would just take things that you'd experience over the week or something and put that in a song?
You just get joy out of it. I think just expressing yourself honestly in a creative medium is just a joy. It's just so natural, and it makes you feel fulfilled. It makes you feel part of something bigger. It makes you feel like you have a purpose. So I'd say that's what I get out of it. Still to this day. Yeah.
And now I read somewhere that you kind of changed up your songwriting methods over the years, where you used to write every day and now you kind of wait for a better time to write. How has that transition gone for you? How has that kind of evolution of your songwriting gone for you?
Yeah, it's just really been a natural evolution more than something that I've done consciously. I think every day is an opportunity to be creative. Like when you're a creative person, ideas come to you all the time. And so it's not so much that I've become less prolific or less creative as I've learned myself a little better. So I know kind of which ideas really have a foundation and which ideas have a lot of potential. And then I'll put more energy into those. But creating little melodies and little lines and writing them down all the time is still something that I do on a daily basis. I think I'm just more intentional about which songs I finish now, because I know what it takes to finish a song and record a song and put a song out into the world. So I think I'm a little bit more selective about it.
Right. And I can imagine, and this might be wrong because I'm not a songwriter or a musician in any way, but when you are younger, perhaps there's so many possibilities that it's more difficult to figure out what you want to do. And then is it fair to say that the last couple of years you've kind of found, well, you're still very diverse, I must say, but have you kind of found what you're good at and kind of what you want?
Yeah, I think so. But it's funny that you say that you kind of caught your question, because I do still feel like I'm always experimenting. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like even the ideas that aren't going to end up on a record are still sometimes worth exploring, because you learn so much. Like I as a musician and a songwriter and a singer and a producer, you just learn by experimentation and trial and error. And that's the only way to grow. So I just follow, if an idea excites me, I try to follow it and just see where it goes.
Can you give me one example of something like that in the last maybe 6 months or 12 months where you had an idea which you ultimately didn't use, but it led you to something else?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. That happens all the time. There's a bunch of examples of that in All of the Boys. So All of the Boys took a while to, the recorded version, the album version, took a while to craft, because I wanted it to be kind of like a rock Tom Petty thing, but I also wanted it to be a little bit 80s, a little bit with some synth pop elements. So blending those two worlds took a lot of trial and error. Like at times we had like strumming Rickenbackers and things. We had much more distorted guitars that weren't so muted. We also went through a phase in All of the Boys where we had like bigger synth pads, and it was much more melodic with synth lines on top, like the Cars, the Cars. It was kind of like that. And so I don't know, it's just a process of living with something and, oh, that's not quite right. Or, oh, this is definitely right, but it doesn't work with this. So now we have to change this. And it's just like having your hands in the clay until it feels right, or someone just takes it away from you, because you could also just never finish, it could always be in process.
So somebody has to go, okay, now it's enough. We can't do anymore. It's.
Yeah. I mean, usually I think when a production is finished, I'm usually pretty good about knowing that, but there's some exceptions. But like, for example, a mix, like you can tweak a mix forever. Like you could never stop tweaking a mix. And it's not like right or wrong. It's just different options. So that sometimes has to be taken away from me.
Right. But I do, every once in a while, I'll talk to artists about this. And one thing they'll say, and I think this is something you said in another interview as well, where if you strip a song down to its bare bones, if it still stands up, that means it's a good song. And then the way you fill it in, you'll have 100 people making 100 different songs. But so what is your approach, especially now with making a dance mix, making a really stripped down kind of coffee house mix? So what is your approach with those things? Is it again experimentation?
Partially, but at first I want to address the first part of your question, which is something that I've I've had conversations with other musicians and songwriters about, which is like, if you strip a song down, ideally it's going to stand up as a great song on guitar or piano. But then, there's this whole musical aspect to production and to songwriting that, some great bands, like if you think of The Who or you think of Queen, and you think of like how inextricably linked some of that songwriting is to those guitar parts or drum parts, or, or even if you think about classical music, like where there's so much classical music with no lyrics, and the melody still stands up, but it's the orchestration that makes it special. So it's so funny because you also don't want to be so reductive that you only think about songs in terms of lyrics and melody. Like sometimes the music and the production is what makes, like, if you take We Will Rock You, yeah, it's a great song if you take away the drums, but like the boom, boom, shh, da-dum, like it excites everyone, like it's just as much a part of the song as anything else. So I don't know. That's a fun one to debate. Like we can debate that forever. But in terms of all of the boys, yeah, especially the Coffee House mix, which is a complete re-record. Like it's a completely different version. There's nothing on the original master track that's on the Coffee House version. We did it at a different tempo and everything. That was really special because I think that brings out another dimension emotionally to the song. But yeah, I love dance music. I obviously love country music and country instrumentation. So it's fun to do different mixes and see what people like.
Sure. And very quickly about this, then, do you go into a different kind of mood or mindset when you're playing a coffee house setting than when you're singing for another kind of version or setting? Do you have to get in a different mind space?
It's very organic, though. It just happens very naturally because when you hear those instruments, like when you hear the brushes on the drums and the upright bass and acoustic guitar, I mean, you're not going to wail over it, So it just happens very naturally. And it's actually fun. I love singing a little bit more dynamically and subtly.
Okay.
Really fun.
And, well, you mentioned the production or the importance that production can have on a song. I mean, you are quite into production and you play a bunch of instruments. So does that help with kind of structuring a song and kind of knowing what certain instruments do and kind of figuring out how to...
Yeah, especially if you want to be involved in production, you have to know and learn your stuff, I mean, it's taken me years. I've learned so much from starting with Mac McAnally and some of the studio musicians in Nashville, and then my co-producer Rick Wake and Gustavo Celis and Jorge Stelling and Nir Z and Glenn Worf, all these people who have been like my core group, who I consider my production team for years. I mean, I've learned so much about instrumentation, about what fits in a mix, about how to layer things. And then you learn so much by just throwing ideas at the wall, But yeah, you really, it's a lifelong craft, just like anything else. You really have to study it and have your feet in the mud with it.
Sure. Do you have any new instruments in sight that you think maybe that's one I'll still want to be able to play?
Well, actually, it's not like a physical instrument, but I really want to learn more about programming and Pro Tools now.
Right, okay.
Because it allows me to put down so many ideas that I already have. And I've always worked with all those people. But now that I'm in quarantine, I'm like itching to do it myself, And also I have this fascination with drums. I don't know if I would like go all the way to learn drums and play them on a regular basis, but I have been learning a lot more about that instrument and that craft. So that I have definitely a fascination with drums.
Well, you mentioned something interesting, which is the sense of independence, and is it fair to say that independence has always been important for you in what you do, and kind of having confidence in yourself that you yourself can do it?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a big dream to chase and a awesome life, to be an artist. But it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of courage. But it's an amazing job to have, if you can even call it that. Yeah.
when it comes to the lyrics, then in what stage do these come in? Is it early on? Can it be? I suppose it's different for each song, but is that something you focus on beforehand, or is that more after the instrumentation is done?
It depends. But lyrics are really, really important to me.
Okay.
I find an original lyric or an inspired lyric to be relatively rare. Like I can't just sit down and write lyrics. Like I really have to be inspired or feel like the idea is new or fresh or worthy of a song. And I feel the same way about melody, but I feel like I'm still in the phase musically where like I just throw up ideas. Like I get so excited. I'm like this. Whereas with lyrics, I think I'm more particular now. I've been writing them longer. Because I've been writing since I was really young, and I love poetry so much. So I don't know. It's difficult to explain because sometimes a new, fresh idea just comes to you, and it kind of carries itself through. Right. And then sometimes it doesn't. So I don't really know how it works. It's magical. But I do love poetry, and I love words, and I love a great lyric story.
Well, one thing that I hear from artists quite often is you do have to live life in order to be able to write lyrics. You have to go through certain experience or people telling you about certain experiences. So when it comes to your songs, then, we mentioned All of the Boys. Well, do you remember what mindset you were in when you wrote the lyrics for that song?
Yeah, originally I wrote All of the Boys about my sister. So my sister's she's this cool girl, and she's kind of like one of the guys. And I just thought that was I just admired that about her. And I was like, because I've never been like a super social, like party person. I mean, I can be very outgoing and personable, like when I want to, but I wouldn't say that's my nature. So I was just kind of looking at that in her and admiring that. So the original hook was actually, she makes friends with all of the boys. And it was from the third person. And then Zach Brown, I brought the song to Zach Brown a few months after I wrote it. And he suggested that I change it to the first person and make it a song for me, which was great advice. And so he changed it to I make friends with all of the boys. And you know, it's funny because speaking of lyrics, like I would have never written that about myself. Number one, because it's not really how I feel about myself. And number two, it almost felt like bragging, you know, like, I'm friends with all of the boys, like blah, 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 blah. So I don't know if I would have written those lyrics about myself. So I'm glad that Zach made that suggestion.
Okay. Well, talking about Zach, because you've worked with him for a while now, and then being surrounded by you mentioned all those producers. Is there something you can share that you've kind of discovered about the type of music that you want to make in the last year, maybe? Something that came to you or you kind of figured out about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm kind of honing in more on my style and my craft and always learning and evolving with that. And hopefully that's showing in my music. But at the same time, like especially with this quarantine now, I feel more kind of creatively free than maybe I have in a really long time. I just feel like I'm taking time to learn new styles of music. Like I'm brushing up on jazz, which I was really into in my early 20s. And so it's funny, like I feel like I do feel like I'm honing in more in my style, but at the same time, I feel more creative and experimental than ever. And embracing that is really fun for me because we're living in 2020. I mean, there's no rules, there's no limit. And that's what being an artist is about. So I don't know, both those things are happening in me.
Oh, that's good. And then with what you mentioned, that you don't see yourself always as the most social person. So are you the most happy kind of where you're sitting right now with all those instruments and sound equipment?
Yeah, I am. I always have been. So in that way, as a musician, we're very blessed in quarantine because we can kind of keep ourselves creatively engaged and busy. But I know it's a really challenging time for a lot of the world. So sending all my best energy out there.
Right. Finally, then, what are you? Well, it's difficult because usually I would ask, are you working towards an album? But now
Yeah.
we're in this kind of limbo type thing. So how do you? Is it now just a period of experimentation, just being creative, and once this whole thing is over, we'll figure things out?
Yeah, I mean, I am working on an album
Okay.
technically. We were in the middle of recording when quarantine started, and so we've kind of maintained a remote session
Okay.
schedule. But yeah, I am working on new music, and this will be a great year to do it, until touring gets back up. So I have a lot of new songs that I'm going to finish and put out as soon as they're done. I want to put out kind of a steady stream of music throughout
Okay.
the summer because I think now is a great time to release music. I'm going to release a song next month that I've had for a while. So
And then, can you share anything about the song or not yet?
yeah, yeah, I can. I mean, I haven't announced it yet, but it's not like a secret or anything. I'm going to
Well,
release.
I'm not going to post this today anyway. So
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to release a song called Intimacy.
okay.
Intimacy is a song I wrote a couple years ago, and it's going to be on my second album. And I love it. It's very different for me. It's very cool. You'll see.
Mhm.
I'll be curious to hear what you think of it.
Right, and then I have to ask, with a title like Intimacy, where does a song like that originate? Because I can imagine that will be very close to you.
Yeah, that's yeah, I love that title. I love that word. I always have. But that song is actually it's kind of about that push and pull when the push and pull of getting vulnerable with someone and being honest and open with someone. And like when you fall in love, you intrinsically kind of give up some control to another
Sure.
person, or give a piece of your heart to another person. And there's like a fear in that, especially if you have like control issues or or trust issues or something. So that's what that song is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, Caroline, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for doing your homework. Those are
Oh,
really
no
good
worries.
questions.